Go.
Welcome to this portion of the Roadmap series, Accelerated Learning Through an Integrated System of Support, and today's topic related to stakeholder mapping by engaging stakeholders strategically. My name is Becky Fogel. I'm the director of the Patton East office, and I'm so happy to be presenting this information along with my colleague, Dr. Leanna Lawson, Program Director for Training and Consultation with AIU 3. Dr. Lawson and I would also like to thank our team members, Dr. Lee Burkett, PDE Director for Career and Technical Education, Ms. Jill Manska, Program Director, Waterfront Learning for AIU 3, and Kimberly Jenkins, Educational Consultant with Patton East. So let's talk about strategic stakeholder mapping. It's clear that students benefit when families and community members form powerful partnerships with schools and school systems. Making decisions in an inclusive and transparent way leads to better decisions and encourages stakeholders to contribute and become partners in achieving the goals, both across the Commonwealth and in our local communities. With a focus on strategic engagement, stakeholders develop the buy-in to collaborate and support improvement strategies that they help to develop. Partnerships with a diversity of stakeholders, including parents, family members, community-based, religious and/or philanthropic organizations, community-based organizations, and the like, can then build local capacity required to develop and implement innovative and ambitious strategies for meeting the needs of all students. So our guiding question for today is, how will the needs of students and families, especially the most vulnerable, and the voices of educators be incorporated into the structures and decisions school systems make for the upcoming school year? Throughout this session, we'll be taking a little bit deeper dive at what actually is the definition around the concept of stakeholder engagement, what it really means and what it doesn't, and why it's so important. We'll discuss and consider some ideas about how to go about authentically engaging the right stakeholders for each particular school and community. This is not a one-size-fits-all proposition. We'll look specifically at an identified four-phase process with particular attention given to the sometimes skipped over but crucially important process of planning before diving in to engage stakeholders, to avoid an unintended cost of failure. For the purposes of this process, we offer two resources that can effectively guide our thinking about how we can engage stakeholders in a more strategic fashion. First, we have 5 criteria for effective stakeholder engagement in education from thoughtexchange.com. And secondly, resource mapping from the Harvard School of Graduate Education's Making Caring Common project. The links to both of these resources you can see on the slide here, and will be made available again for you to access at the end of the session if you prefer that. If you would like to review them before moving through the presentation, you may pause the recording at this time, locate the documents, and then rejoin, or we'll offer the links again at the conclusion if you prefer to listen first and access later. Whichever works best for you is fine. So let's talk about stakeholder and engagement. Stakeholder is defined by dictionary.com in 3 ways. First, in terms of those who wager or gamble. Second, a person with an interest or concern in something, especially a business. And or 3, as denoting a type of organization or system in which all members or participants are seen as having an interest in its success. Bingo, that's what we're after. Everyone seeking success in our schools. Engagement is defined in the dictionary as a noun, indicating betrothal, such as marriage, an arrangement to do something or go somewhere at a fixed time, like dinner or an appointment, the action of being engaged, or a fight or battle between armed forces. Hopefully, none of these fit your school team's efforts, even though aspects of each of these may be present from time to time. For our purposes, we need to delineate between involvement and engagement. We stress the need to authentically engage folks in what is happening, seeking and valuing their input, not just involving them by purchasing space in our handbook, our sports, music, or theater programs, maybe bringing cupcakes or native foods to gatherings, things like that. As Karen Mapp's book, Beyond the Bake Sale, tells us, it's so much more than that. So put together, stakeholder engagement is defined by Thought Exchange as an ongoing system through which leaders meaningfully connect with, learn from, and communicate with individuals and groups. So we're looking at a very deliberate and systematic identification of stakeholders in a cycle of engagement. Stakeholders should have valued influence throughout the decision-making process, not just as an afterthought or to be included just at the end to look good. The bottom line is stakeholder engagement is ensuring that the ideas and concerns of relevant stakeholders are represented and thoughtfully considered. What it is not is group decision-making that tells stakeholders what has already been decided and then expecting them to join in and support it. Traditional engagement methods have not always delivered the results we need to impact positive or sustained systemic change. In this day and age, and particularly as we move, hopefully, to a post-COVID world with increasing expectations for more modern technology-based solutions, the key to more successful initiatives could be bolstered by adherence to FACT criteria. So let's take a look about what these double FACTs are. The first F is FAST. Long consultation lead times are not always a luxury you can have. The system you use needs to be easy and fast to deploy. It should also be easy and fast for your audience to understand and participate in as well. The second F is flexible. Your engagement system's flexibility can be measured in a number of ways, such as its ability to cover a wide range of topics, accommodations for a range of acceptable response types, and a cost structure that allows for repeat usage. You'll get a lot more mileage out of a system that comes with fewer constraints regarding its use. It's kind of that keep it simple, sweetie, or you may know that by some other words. Another important determination of flexibility is the system's ability to help choose priorities among all the feedback given. For example, while 50 people might raise a given issue, that doesn't necessarily mean that it should be the top priority. We have to look deeper and consider carefully. Also, we need to share feedback among participants so that all ideas and thoughts are open for everyone's consideration. Often the idea of a single person may trump all other ideas once everyone else becomes aware of it. It is this flexibility that enables you to move from a simple sounding board or survey to a more meaningful platform for genuine insight, issue discovery, and prioritization. So our A stands for accessible. Accessibility should be judged from the perspective of both the user, in this case, likely the LEA administration, and the community participants. Ideally, your engagement system will be available to as many people as possible on both sides of the exchange. The more stakeholders you can reach, the stronger the engagement and the more dependable its output. Now moving along to the C, that's controlled. Assuming your system delivers in terms of being fast, flexible, and accessible, for it to really be able to contribute effectively, it has to allow you to manage the process, keep discussions on topic, and comply with your communications policies. Offer the structure and process to conduct meaningful, organized, and focused engagement. Lastly, the T, transparent. Despite the best of intentions, school groups may be prone to accusations of operating in isolation of and with little feedback to stakeholders. An effective engagement system must make the ongoing discussion visible to all participants, not just at the beginning or end, but throughout the entire process. The benefits of maintaining this level of transparency include mitigation of accusations of closed-door policy discussions, the ability for people to see the input of others and potentially change their own ideas, and discoverable support for any decisions that are made. So, who are the correct stakeholders to include? This will vary by each community, so requires some deep consideration. Universally, family members, parents, grandparents, caregivers, and students themselves should be included. Staff members may be considered by building, by grade, by specialty areas. Don't forget to include non-teaching staff as well. A true representation of your community may include business owners, religious leaders, support organizations, agency staff members, folks with and without children in school, folks with disabilities from representative racial, ethnic, and religious backgrounds. Whatever the makeup of your community is what should be reflected in the stakeholder group that you ultimately convene. Stakeholder engagement plays a vital role in effective leadership in education. We know that. So education leaders typically face three options when it comes to making these important decisions. One, you can choose inaction. Two, you can trust your own instincts or those shared by only your closest advisors. Or three, you can reach out to your stakeholders and see where their interests lie as well. Inaction is the easiest solution in the short term, but it really just likely delays the inevitable and exposes you to risk as a leader. Trusting yourself or only your inner circle is expeditious and often wise, but in some cases may end with unreasonable or inaccurate assumptions, and you can still put yourself at risk if you make the wrong call. Engaging your stakeholders is the most time-consuming of all these options, particularly in the upfront aspect of the process, but it can eliminate personal risk and comes with the extra reward of making the educational leaders be seen as strong communicators, as friends of the community, and in a much more positive light. So by considering all of these strategies we've shared so far, we can predict a number of potential benefits, not the least of which is the likelihood of positive outcomes from a dedicated commitment to equitable work and equitable outcomes. So now we're ready to delve into the more meat of stakeholder engagement, those 4 phases that we mentioned earlier. So at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Lawson to share that with us. Leanna?
Thank you, Becky. Next, we are going to explore the phases of stakeholder engagement. As you can see, the 4 phases include planning, participation, analysis, and sharing. You will quickly notice that we are paying particular attention to the planning phase of stakeholder engagement in this presentation. There are 3 critical aspects of planning that we must consider. First, what decisions are you looking to have stakeholder input on, and who are the stakeholders you would like to bring to the table? Next, we will need to reach back and establish some background specifics to the topic, issue, or area for which you would like stakeholder feedback. Finally, pre-planning and questions for stakeholder sessions ensures that as a leader, you earn and maintain the community's trust and confidence while garnering quality input. We are going to unpack these 3 critical aspects for a good remainder of the rest of this session. Let's first start by engaging in some thinking around stakeholder mapping. Mapping requires that you first identify all of the groups internally and externally who are stakeholders in your district or school. Brainstorm a list, even invite others to brainstorm with you. Think about the 3 general groups that Becky noted in slide 6, district and school staff, families and students, and community members. But now be more specific while you generate your list. The example might be physical education teachers, school counselors, special ed teachers, student council representatives, PBIS student team members, community rec center director, local pastor, community advocate for students with disabilities, a parent representative from each grade, and etc. You may have a very long list if you have been comprehensive in your approach. Next, thinking specifically about the topic, issue, or area that you want stakeholder input around, begin to place stakeholders on your map. Place them in the four quadrants, one of the four quadrants that you see on this slide. We're going to use an example specific to social and emotional learning throughout the rest of the presentation. Using this example, you would place the stakeholders in each quadrant according to their interest in social and emotional learning and the power for which you perceive them to have around this topic. Those stakeholders that you identify as having high power, high interest, are those that you may choose to focus on engaging in future activities to gather their input. In addition, you may want to consider some or all of those that fall into the high power, low interest quadrant in order to meet their needs and to keep them satisfied. To summarize, the key takeaways in stakeholder mapping are to create, again, with a small team, a comprehensive list of stakeholders. Identify the topic or idea you're looking to address, and then map your stakeholders based on the topic, issue, and area of interest you identified in order to get the right stakeholder input. Next, we are going to situate the idea of resource mapping as a method that can support the establishment of the background specific to the topic, issue, or area of focus. Engaging in resource mapping allows you to look deeply at the program, people, services, and other resources currently in place. This allows for transparency with the stakeholder group you will be seeking input from. Before we move forward, I would like to bring your attention to the resource mapping tool that was shared at the beginning of the presentation and is available to you to further guide you in resource mapping exercises in the future. You may want to have this document open as we proceed. Resource mapping can be addressed in 4 steps. First, we pre-plan. Next, we map resources. Then we analyze the resources, and finally, maintain the maps. It is important to know that all of this can be done in a relatively short amount of time with planning. This specific resource mapping tool was designed to take a total of 2 to 3 hours. The tool provides worksheets and guiding questions to support each step in the process. Next, we want to take a few minutes to address each step and share the examples of worksheets and guiding questions used in the process. The pre-planning step requires the identification of a team that can successfully map the resources, people, programs, and services in the identified area of focus. In addition, a meeting time will need to be identified in which the team can complete the mapping. You will see the guiding questions with example responses related to the topic of social emotional learning on this slide. The questions focus on decision-making that will support the ease in completing the next 3 steps of mapping. By pre-planning, you are also likely to more clearly communicate to the team the what, when, where, and why as you prepare to invite them to join you for the mapping session. Let's take a look at the example. Remember, this is not a comprehensive example, but provides a model for your thinking. As you can see, the 4 guiding questions focus your planning. The first question, what do you hope to accomplish or learn from resource mapping, allows you to think about the specific topic, area, or issue that you would like to map. In this example, we are using social emotional learning for our 5-6 school building. Next, pre-planning a date, time, and place to complete both mapping and analysis of that mapping, as well as identifying the individuals that will participate in the mapping. In this example, the team members have some connection to social emotional learning in the 5-6 school building. Identifying who will map, who will participate in analysis, and who will maintain the map for future revisions ensures that you can be clear in your communication. The final guiding question asks that you establish a timeline for the mapping and the analysis and what you hope to produce. In this example, we hope to generate a list of resources after the mapping, a list of recommendations to share with school leaders after the analysis, and a one-pager that outlines all of the currently available resources related to social emotional learning. Next, the team is going to come together to either list or visually represent all of the resources. This activity can be done using flip charts, markers, sticky notes with brainstorming, or simply creating a list with team input. In this example, although not necessarily comprehensive, you can see that the resources identified resulted in a list, which you may remember was one of the outcomes from the pre-planning worksheet. In addition, the team may identify gaps and make recommendations to the leadership. In step 3, analyzing the resource map, you're provided with additional guiding questions to consider as the team observes and discusses gaps in services, people, programs. Let's review an example. Do any of our programs or resources serve a similar purpose? Are any of these resources connected in some way? Are there any gaps in your resources or areas with few programs or resources? Are there any programs that are not used well or frequently? Why or why not? Are there any programs that should be evaluated? What additional programs or activities are needed? As we reviewed those guiding questions, you likely read the examples. The purpose behind the guiding questions are to encourage the team to identify redundancies and gaps, as well as resources that may not be being used or used with fidelity. After identifying, an action plan can be drafted. The action plan reflects any next steps that the team might consider advancing after engaging stakeholder input. This action plan should be fluid until after stakeholder input is garnered. But it can serve as a means of submitting recommendations to the leadership, which was the third outcome identified in the pre-planning worksheet, in our example. The final step in resource mapping is the creation of a plan for maintaining and updating the maps. Again, you will find a set of guiding questions within the resource mapping PDF that will help direct your work. You will be considering where you will keep the map or list and any other worksheets you generate in the process. Make sure it is accessible and others know where it is located. Set a timeline for reviewing, at least annually, but know that if decisions are being made specific to social emotional learning before a year passes, that you should bring the map out and revisit it. Provide any updates specific to adding or deleting resources. This concludes your resource mapping exercise. This information should be helpful in laying the groundwork for a stakeholder group specific to a topic, issue, or area of discussion. In this case, our topic was social emotional learning. It may also help you to pre-plan the questions that you will ask of stakeholders when you bring them together. As part of the planning phase of stakeholder engagement, you have mapped your stakeholders, established some background to share with stakeholders through a resource mapping exercise, and are now ready to predetermine the questions you might want to ask the stakeholder group. As you further consider the questions you would like to have prepared for stakeholders, remember the best questions draw on the widest range of perspectives, which can help you further develop an understanding of the stakeholders' interests. Here are two great questions you might use to start the conversation. Using our example specific to social emotional learning, we might start by asking the following two questions. What concerns do you have about social emotional learning in our school? What are some positive things about social emotional learning in our school? The goal is to build momentum in the conversation, garner input from the community at large that contributes to the direction of the district and/or school, and to build trust, which enhances buy-in when it is time for implementation. The pre-planning phase of strategic stakeholder engagement ends here. We pick up now in the second phase of stakeholder engagement, participation. It should be much, much easier activity having pre-planned adequately. During the participation phase, you may first want to provide a clear explanation of the role of a stakeholder group in providing input around a topic. This allows school leaders to make more objective decisions during next steps. Next, outlining the issue and allowing stakeholders to begin to internalize the topic issue or area. For example, you may share the one-pager created during resource mapping that outlines what is currently in place for social emotional learning. In addition, you are motivating them to be involved in providing input and learning from one another, all while ensuring active participation by all stakeholders. This will be more successful because you have created pre-planned questions. In phase 3, you will focus on analysis. This phase allows for consolidation of all of the input, which may include identifying the relevancy and benefit of each point shared by stakeholders, as well as the qualities surrounding each point. There may be a need to address how individuals clearly interpret things differently, and the precise reason that stakeholder input is so important. Finally, you may benefit from reminding everyone again how stakeholder input is used and to what degree the input influences final decisions that are made. Finally, and not to be forgotten in the cycle of stakeholder engagement, is sharing. Synthesizing and distributing the results in a timely way to interested parties will provide evidence that input was considered. Through sharing, you also maintain the transparency of the work, which will likely increase the buy-in around the final decision. This concludes the phases of stakeholder engagement. We hope that you realize the importance of the planning phase and that stakeholder mapping and resource mapping can contribute to strategic and effective stakeholder engagement. I will now turn the presentation back over to Becky to bring the session to a close.
Thanks so much, Leanna. So in wrapping up the idea of stakeholder engagement, we have to keep in mind that there could be some potential obstacles, and we must consider how to be proactive and preemptive. So if you start noticing things like unreasonable timeframes, For consultation to be meaningful and well received, it has to happen before and after this time. It has to also make sense to the folks who are participating. So make sure that you keep in mind if the time frames seem right to you, they may or may not to your stakeholders. If you are noticing maybe there's some limits on participation, if your engagement groups have relied on live meetings in the past, and maybe haven't been terribly active during COVID times, don't expect a sudden return to, quote, typical meetings that are only offered on school afternoons or evenings to be successful to inspire participation. You might have to really think about what do we have to change to make sure that we are being accessible to all of our stakeholders. So also think about maybe some manipulations or undue influences that may be present. If it's always the same old 10 people showing up at every session, the discussions cannot be deemed representative. These same 10 people will guide the proceedings according to their own needs or the needs of the one or two powerful voices that always seem to dominate these meetings, but not necessarily according to the interests of the majority of stakeholders in the larger community. So be thoughtful about that as well. Be on the lookout for potential external dependencies. If you have to rely on people outside of your organization, such as contracted consultants, to carry out your engagement efforts, then you may not be giving the right message regarding authentic engagement or how important it truly is to your organization. Also, think about being opaque and transparent with your stakeholders. When your chosen system of engagement doesn't let participants see what others are saying, offering them an opportunity to learn new perspectives and potentially change their minds about things, you're not realizing the full potential of engagement. This is often the fatal flaw of surveys. Once questions are asked, results may rarely, if ever, be shared with respondents, and there's no opportunity to change answers if they like what someone else had to say, or they may feel like their questions weren't truly valued or considered to move forward. So think about your own community and your own situation. There's probably lots of other potential obstacles that you might face in your school community and might be different in others. And if you work together to preempt the barriers, you can turn that into a strength. Or if you listen to the what educators need to know about family engagement session, you can turn it into a probability, as they discussed on that event. So again, here are the actual resources that helped guide a lot of this discussion around resource and stakeholder and mapping and engagement, and some of the process that Leanna walked you through. You can see actual templates in those resources that you can use with your teams. So it's ready-made for you. You don't even have to create things. You can take it right from that to help further guide that. So again, we want to thank these resources that came from thoughtexchange.com and from Harvard's Making Caring Common project. It is our hope that you will find these resources as useful as we have, and that you're able to utilize them and to go forth and strategically engage your stakeholders. Please feel free to reach out to either of us if you have further questions regarding this session. It really has been our pleasure to share this time with you today. As you see on this final closing slide, you need to make sure that you access the attendance form by either accessing the links listed here or via the QR code scanner using your smartphone. The exit code for this session is 93186, 93186. Thank you so much. Have a great school year ahead, engaging your stakeholders.